Welcome to the Common Cool podcast,
where we discuss the power of addiction,
the art of suffering,
and the joy of freedom.
Welcome to the Common Cool podcast. My name is Miguel.
And I'm Jeff. And today we have a friend of mine, colleague that I've worked with for a while back when he was here in Colorado. And then he moved to Florida. His name's Kevin Peterson. He started out, just like all of us as a therapist. And then, and since then he has moved in a direction of working with families. He's a marriage and family therapist. And he's taken off into a lot of different directions in working with families that are struggling with loved ones in addiction or other mental health issues. I'd imagine that would be fair to say too. He is now consultant. He consults organizations. He consults people. And he is an author. And he is I don't know when you founded, but you can tell us that founded the Chronic Hope Institute, which I know has been going on for a while, and now it's just expanding in different directions where you're training therapists to work well with families, which is a much needed service. And I'm excited to hear more about you. So Kevin, let's tell us about you and tell us about.
Yeah, man, it's great to see you. It's great to see both of you. I still do a little bit of therapy. I have an office in Denver. I live in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. I'm about 8 blocks from the ocean. And because when people are like, how in God's name do you live in Florida? I live 8 blocks from the ocean. And it didn't cost me $5 million. So yeah, that's the thing there. So I have a couple of people that work for me in Denver. And we just do regular therapy. They're not regular therapy. And then I do coaching with families all over the country. And then I do consulting with treatment centers or programs about how to better understand working with families. And then I do have an online course for therapists and treatment professionals on how to work with families that are struggling with addiction. I've written a couple books. I'm kind of all over the place, but that's who I've always been, and that's how I've always operated. The genesis of it, it's like we were talking earlier, I was born in Stanford Hospital in Palo Alto, California. I was born into a lovely family that had a deep, dark secret, and that was my mother struggled with prescription drug addiction and a lot of mental health. And on the outside, we look like, oh my gosh, look at this big, beautiful home and all these wonderful things. And on the inside, it was just crazy town. And we just never knew what was coming next. And I'm not talking about as a teenager. I'm talking about first grade, and I started using drugs and alcohol when I was about 13, 14 and really took to it. It was just like, whoa, this is great. What does this mean? I needed this in the first grade. On literally, the first grade, and that really, my life got very chaotic and I did well in high school, but then things got really bad to the University of Southern California, Los Angeles. And the fall of 1982, and that's when the wheels really fell off the train, the wagon. My parents ended up sitting down with me and saying, I love you, but we're not doing this anymore. In 1990, I got sober in 91, been sober ever since. Thanks. And I got to graduate school in January of 2008 in Denver at Regis University. Got a master's in marriage and family therapy, and then worked for 3 years in community mental health in South Denver at Arapahoe Douglas Mental Health. And then decided it was time for me to open up my own shop. And I did, and there was a line, I swear to God, I would never work with families and addicts and alcoholics because those people are crazy. And that's all that. There was a line at the door, man. And that's all I do. It's because I get it. I get it personally, I get it professionally. And I have a plan. I have a very systematic, follow the plan and we'll move down the road type of stuff. So that was kind of long-winded. I apologize.
No, that's good. That's good, Dad. Thanks so much. I worked at Repo. We had Rebecca Case on a couple of weeks ago. You know Rebecca? Yeah. And she's doing a ton with R. So like you said, like tell us a little bit more like you didn't want to get into the field, but then you had, like you thought about the field, but what kind of drew you to it? What kind of drew you to that? Like other than just report,
Well, what drew me to it, they were paying. And so I was like, cool. But what drew me, when I opened up my private practice, in a perfect world, let me actually step back to when I was at Regis. After my first year, they decided to open up a master's in marriage and family therapy. And I took theories, and the woman that taught us theories, Nicole, who was just one of the best professors I ever had, said, 16-week class, we're going to cover 1 or 2 theories a week. One of these theories is going to bonk you on the forehead, and that's the kind of therapist you'll probably end up. And for me, it was family systems. It just made sense. And I told her, I was like, oh my God, this is it. And she's like, lucky for you, next semester, we're opening up an LMFT program. You should apply to be in it. And I did, and I got in. And I was actually I was the first class to graduate in 2011 from the LMFT program at Regis. And for me, it just all made sense. Understanding things from a family perspective where all the inputs were going on at once and layering and, all stuff was going haywire and crazy and nutty. Now, I have a theory, just my theory, no proof to it. All therapists come from screwy families, because that's why we become therapists, because first of all, we get it. And second of all, we want to address it. And so that's what showed up at my door. So I opened up in April of 2014, and that was 3 months after Colorado legalized recreational marijuana. And I'm not kidding. I had a line at the door of families that are like, what do we do? He won't go out of the base. He's stoned all day playing video games. He won't go to school. And we're not going to put our hands on him. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to put your hands on him. I don't want you to bully him. I just want you to hold him accountable. And there's a way to go about that. And so that, again, short question, long answer. That's how I got into it. And it just evolved from there. And I got a great contracting gig with a treatment program up in Boulder, North Star. And they were like, hey, we need some help with the families, but we don't want you to do family therapy. We want you to take mom and dad and get them off our back so we can take care of the kid. Because they're hovering, and they're interfering. And I was like, okay, sure, no problem. And so that's kind of honed my craft there and learning. And a lot of that was helping the families and the parents understand what they had to heal their wound because they were acting out of their rule, right? They had legitimate concerns and were talking about their kids, but they were acting out and actually unknowingly sabotaging the process of their loved ones' recovery.
Yeah. I know a lot of facilities, even the facilities that I was part of, that family program is kind of hit or miss when you have a loved one going into rehab. Like it's like, well, you can come in, you can meet with your therapist once or something, or it just is like more of like and they offer resources. But yeah, there's definitely that piece that that doesn't get met well, when it comes to like with the families. Yeah.
Well, ironically, about a year later, I got approached by another treatment program in Lake, and they said, hey, we want you to put together a 2-day family program. And I was like, okay, but it's going to be a little different than what you're thinking. It's not going to be, giant group therapy where everybody yells at each other and then everybody cries. Because I think that's kind of a waste of time. I think what we're going to do is educate. This is the one weekend ever that we get So let's educate the hell out of them on this is addiction. And these were all 12-step based facilities. So I said, let's teach them the same things you're teaching the kids so they can have a common language, and then let's teach them codependency and the recovery process from codependency. When on the next day, let's teach them communication skills that they can take home with them. And I think that's probably going to be enough. And it really was. We would get to about 2 or 3 o'clock on the second day, and you could just see the families. They were just like, can we just go to dinner with our kid? I'm like, sure. But I used to get notes and letters from those parents all over the country saying, this is our 5th time doing family week. You're the first one to explain the steps. And you're the first one to explain. Everyone else said, oh, you need to go to Al-Anon. But you're the first one that told us why. So I did that for 4 years at 4 different programs. And that's where it started. When I went to Red Rock and then Shadow Mountain and then Peaks. Yeah.
You mentioned that you started with the MFT program, right? Can you describe a little bit more what that entails for somebody that has no idea what that is? And maybe from there, how did that take you all the way to your current journey where you have your own shop, and what is still there from the initial learnings and what's new now that you have learned a lot more since then that you brought to your shop?
Oh, gosh. And so my first year at Regis, they had everyone does a program that's designed to get you to be an LPC, a licensed professional counselor, individual therapy. They do offer family stuff, and you can get a certificate in family. But when they decided to open up an MFT track, an LMFT track, what that meant, you were going to get the basics like everybody else, but you were going to be much more focused on the system that the individual comes from. Does that make sense? And so it was really, and then how to work in the structure of that system. So you're not identifying or attaching to one person. And like, say the 3 of us were doing therapy. I would not attach or identify with either of you. I would be attached and identified to the group and moving the group where the group wants to go. And it's very, therapists kind of break down into 2 columns, right? There's I like working with people individually and having more than one person in the room scares the living hell out of me, and then, by the way, if you add addiction on top of that, it completely freaks therapists out. And I get it, yeah, I mean, it's like, we'll add one, galactic mystery to another one and try and figure that out. And so that was really, that was the genesis of it for me, because it just made sense for me. I was just like, oh my God, I get it. When we would start doing these classes and do, different kinds of family therapy or couples therapy or, adolescent therapy, teenage therapy, and working within the structure of the whole family system. And it just made perfect sense. So that education was great. And then I interned at Arapahoe Douglas Mental Health in Child and Family Services. And, that really cemented for me that these kids that I was meeting with, they had stuff going on. There's no question about it. But they didn't just wake up one day and decide, I'm going to kill myself. I'm feeling suicidal. I'm feeling anxiety. I'm going to, it was very much by virtue of the system that they were in and where they were coming from. And so I really started to try to pull the family in, whatever the family was, individual, your parents, whatever, step parents, whatever. I don't care, grandparents, bring everybody in the room. And instead of just focusing on, oh my God, what are we going to do about the kid? I was like, okay, so we'll take care of the kid. That's not a problem. But let's talk about what's going on in the house and how the house looks and what the system is like. And, and really, are there good boundaries? Is there accountability? Is there a schedule? Kids love boundaries because it makes them feel safe. They might find it, But when they know there's things on a schedule, and they know that dinner's at a certain time, and they know that this is how things are going to go, that makes them feel safe because it's not unpredictable. And so I was really working hard with the families to get them to grasp and understand that. That's where I had the most success, and that's where I really started to see the difference. I also spent 3 years on a team that intervened on kids in the ER. The kids were suicidal, homicidal, and psychotic. And and it's always 2 a.m. when it's snowing. And they were like, really? You couldn't have done this at 6? And there's a game on I wanted to watch. And, I would bounce into these ERs and sit and talk with the kid. And then I would go talk to the family, and I'm like, here's the thing. I don't really think we need to stick them in a hospital for a week or 2 weeks. I think what we're going to do is come into your house. They love that. And do in-home family therapy and really assess what's going on out in the family. And now I can understand why the kid is struggling, because no one's listening. And that could be for legitimate reasons. I'm not saying they're bad parents or bad family.
So I have a quick question, sorry to interrupt, but this really caught my attention. So this idea of in-home family therapy is not very pervasive, but it sounds really amazing. Why is it not more pervasive?
Well, there's people in it. Because you're coming into their house and you're seeing what's going on. No, it's so much easier just to toss the kid out at the treatment program or the therapy center. I'll be back in an hour, but when you let someone in the house, they see what's going on, and they get a better vision of what's going on. And I think it's a little scary. Again, what do most therapists do? They get trained to sit in a room 6 or 8 hours a day, talk to one person at a time, write their notes, and go home. Now, we're going to tell you, guess what you're going to do? You're going to go spend 3 or 4 hours a week, or sometimes twice a week, in somebody else's home, observe how they operate and offer resources and offer solutions, and that's scary. I mean, there were some times when it was literally scary, but the good news is, I'll tell you, here's the really interesting. So the woman who's in charge of the money, after a year of us doing this, pulled me to their office and said, Kevin, I want to show you something. I was like, sure. She's like, last year, this month, we spent $150,000 a month hospitalizing. She was on Medicaid. Okay. $150,000 in Medicaid money hospitalizing children. This year, we spent $30,000. That's because of your team. And then the other big thing that everybody freaks out is like, with these kids, you're going to kill themselves. These are kids that need help. Oh my God, you're putting them at risk. Guess how many kids we lost? Not that many. And we didn't lose any. And then we also, we ended up getting stationed on campus as well. So in the public schools, the kids could come talk to us. And that worked out really, really well. Because we also worked with a population that a lot of times couldn't get to our office or wouldn't come to our office, immigrant population, Hispanic. I back when I was fluent in Spanish and did a lot of my therapy in Spanish, I'm not now. I mean, it's still there, but it's not. I don't want you to start hitting me. I'm like, yeah, so I'm not lying to you, but it's been a long time. I lived in Spain for a while. But you're engaging with people that are like, parents have 3 jobs and don't trust the government and may not be legally in the United States. But their kid is completely freaking out. And it's like, well, okay. So I ended up, my last gig for 6 months was being stationed on campus and working with these kids at the Sheridan School District. And I loved that. It was so much fun. And they're, therapists talk about, especially community mental health therapists. Sorry, I am on a roll here. Sorry. Therapists always tell me, so my sister was a teacher, okay? And she's a great teacher. She's a master's, special ed, bilingual. I mean, rock and roll, all power to teachers. as a master's level clinician, bilingual, how much money do you think I was making in 2013 and 2012?
2013, I bet you were making, as a therapist, as a full-time therapist, we're making like 55 grand.
I was making
50 grand.
40 grand.
40, yeah, they were not getting paid. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, the equivalent teacher starts at like $55,000 a year, which they should. Okay, let's be clear. No knocking on teachers. But where do you think the teachers send the problem kid? And so, I did that. I liked that gig, by the way, working in the Sheridan School District, and man, 2 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. Each day of the week, I got dropped in playing, and I would just sit and hang out with these kids. I mean, just hang out with them. One kid wanted to play soccer, so we played soccer. Other kids wanted to talk about life. Other kid, it was like a dream come true, But it was very engaged and energetic. And then the parents, when they would come in, right? And I would speak. My favorite thing was when these kids, these 8 and 10-year-old kids, they have all the power because they speak English, And so they're coming in, the kids like, well, let me tell you what's going on. Mom and dad are there. Whoever. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I look at the kid, I'm like, so here's the deal. I speak Spanish. And the kid's eyes get really big, and the parents are like, oh. And I said, so you want to try again? And the kid's like, well, okay. And my dad are like, yeah. All right. And then we would start talking about, how to create a solution in the system and try and understand what was going on and how. I ended up getting burnt out. Here was the ultimate insult. When I left Arapahoe Douglas Mental Health in July of 2014, I went up on the health exchange, the insurance exchange, and I qualified for Medicare. That was like, that's insulting, and so, I loved doing that work, but it was brutal work and it was hard. And to be honest with you, there was a little bit of intimidation and threatening. Like, if you don't do this, you're going to get fired. If you do it this way, you're going to get fired. If you do this, you're going to get fired. And I was like, for 40 grand, it isn't worth it. And so I jumped over to the private sector and went to the dark side.
Yeah. Hard work, anything, where you deal with families and children and when someone tells me they work for Child Protective Services, I'm like, God bless you. It's like, most people I imagine only work there. The average probably the length of stay there is probably like a year working there, or 2 years or,
I think I'll tell you something. My honest opinion is I think it should be mandatory for everyone that goes to graduate school to spend at least a year, if not 2 years, in a community mental health organization. Because let me tell you, nothing phases me. It walks in the door and I'm like, okay, cool. I know how to resource. I knew all the crisis numbers by heart. My first client as an intern, my first day and my first client was like, my mom's boyfriend molested me. And I'm like, okay. I went to my supervisor. I'm like, I have a question. She's like, here's the sheet. Call this number. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, that was my first day. And that's what you're dealing with. And it's like, okay, well, and so, I just got really good at that. But I would tell you, I talked to people that didn't do work like that and that kind of environment. And they just look at you like, I don't understand. What do you mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100% on that. Like, I think that the experience you get from like different organizations like that and seeing like the different types of things that can go on with mental health and addiction and the extremes and being able to kind of troubleshoot quickly and handle things quickly and, expedite things quickly, I think is an amazing set of experiences. And a lot of therapists going straight from grad school into private practice, you may miss a lot, Question. Yeah. So you're working with kids and you go into the homes, is there when you go in there, a lot of times I know that with working with families, like there's an identified patient in the family. Like the idea like that the kid is the problem or the addict is the problem. Like you're here to help the addict and we're here to kind of support you help the addict. How do you kind of like make that switch or that change? Like this is a systematic problem.
The initial phase of that is a lot of education and helping people understand, and then answering a lot of questions. Dispelling a lot of myths. Like when I'm working with a family that has. So you kind of combine the two things. When I was doing that with Rapo Douglas, it really wasn't substance abuse based, mental health based, and the in-home family stuff. Now, what I do now, which is much more like, somebody says, my husband, my wife, my sister, my daughter, son, I can help them triage that initial crisis of, oh, okay, sure. Well, let's set some boundaries. And if they violate the boundaries, then we got to have a plan to put them in the tree and I can show you. That's easy. That's just bam, 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 bam. Steps 1 through 10, whatever. Once that's accomplished, then it's about engaging with the family members and saying, hey, I understand that it's been a rodeo for you and a tornado and a roller coaster, and it's really hard. Let's talk about how you react and the impact that it's having on you. And every family I talk to is like, there's no history of substance abuse or mental health in our family ever since Adam and Eve. It's just him, And I'm literally, to this day, they say that. And I'm like, and I don't fight. I used to be like, what? Now I'm like, oh, okay. And tell me about your mom and dad. Tell me about your grandma and grandpa. Tell me, as things start to come up, like, oh, well, Uncle Larry, he didn't have a problem, but he lived in an institution, or my other favorite is, oh no, my family was perfect. We moved every year for 15 years. Really? Okay. Why was that? Well, my dad just kept getting better and better jobs. Well, after you get the third or fourth job, shouldn't he have been making enough money to stay in one place? And they're like, I never thought about that. I said, is there a chance that he was getting fired? Or being chased by the law, or, and, educating them. And then the really important part is helping them understand you're not responsible for your loved one's addiction or mental health issues. You are responsible for how you respond to them and how you react to them. And that's right in that moment, right, in that engagement, that's where I can do a lot of the work that I'm really good at. It's helping them understand that there's a different way, other than swooping in and solving the problem and fixing things, or belittling them and berating them and being punitive, or just shutting them out of your life entirely. There's actually an alternative. There's an alternative of saying, I love you, but I'm not going to do this anymore. And if you, as an adult, want to continue to live this lifestyle, you can do that, but you're not going to do it. If, however, you want to continue to be part of the family, we have some conditions that we need you to meet, and we'll help you meet them. You can't ask somebody who's actively involved in drugs and alcohol to turn on a dime and suddenly behave. It's like, that's not possible.
Man, I wish I had access to you when I was going through my family problems when my marriage was falling apart. You sound like a really good therapist. But from that learning that I went through, so just so you know, I am also a recovering addict. I've been in recovery for 3 years now. I had a relapse, so 18 months is a relapse, so more or less. So And that obviously brought a lot of problems to the marriage that I had. And I'm going to make a personal question, but with the hope that it helps somebody else out there. So in my particular situation, I was the struggling addict, and there were, in addition, a lot of problems between me and my ex-wife. And because of the addiction problems, we couldn't address the other problems, because no matter what, it was back to, well, you're the addict, right? We tried to do family and couples therapy a couple different times, 3 different times to be exact, but it just didn't work because it was back to, well, you're the addict, right? And in that situation, what is something that a person can do to sort of try to move things forward? You being the addict, there's nothing that you'll be able to say that can turn the other person around, because you're just the addict, you're wrong. So what are some strategies that people could use that could attempt to try to move things forward in a positive direction?
Great question. And obviously, as a LMFT, I do a lot of that engagement, right? Couples coming to me saying he or she has a problem. And what they're expecting is me to hold that person while they beat them. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, we're not going to do that. Well, that's not how this is going to work. How this is going to go is, and this is probably shoots myself in the foot more often than not in the concept of making money, but my perspective is I can't really do good couples therapy unless you guys are doing your own individual and addressing your own stuff. Because couples therapy isn't about dumping your stuff on the other person. Couples therapy is, how do we get better as a couple? Does that make sense? So bear in mind, if that's the goal and that's the systemic idea of how do we get better, you can't use couples therapy to process your personal trauma or your personal stuff. You need to do that individually and then come into the couple's room and say, here's the stuff I'm working on. And the other person says, yeah, and here's the stuff I'm working on. And then the good couples therapist can be like, okay, knowing that this is where we're coming from, let's figure out a path of how to make things better based upon understanding each other's situation. Now, that's half the answer. Here's the other half. If you're actively using drugs and alcohol, I can't help. Period. And this is another big difference between me and other therapists. They'll continue to see someone that's actively using. I'll never do that. I just am like, sorry, I can't help you, because the real person is not showing up to therapy. The drunk or the high person is showing up to therapy, and I can't help that person, you know? So I have a pretty strict boundary around that. And I believe in a lot of accountability. Now, I also believe in accountability for the other person, and telling the other person, hey, you don't have to put up with that. When we come into therapy, I'm not going to just sit here and let you wail on this because they're drinking or using. I'm not going to waste money and time on that. You need to go get help. The question you got to ask is, why are you still with this person? That's just as crazy as somebody that's struggling with drugs and alcohol.
Right. So basically the bottom line is, for the therapy to be effective between two people in a marriage, the family, each person needs to get help individually, whether it's therapy or recovery or both. In some cases you need to do both. If you're the addict, you probably have to do both. If you're not the addict, you have to do one of those. But that's the only way that you get a formula for success.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, I get a lot of referrals from other therapists that are like, well, I've been seeing this couple, they're not making any progress. When the first session with it, it's like, well, this guy's actively stoned 24/7. She hasn't seen a therapist on her own. I just making it up. It's not always that way, but nobody's doing any individual accountability work. And I'm like, well, if you want to work with me, this is what it's going to look like. And if you don't, that's okay too. I can help you get better. Obviously I'm a big Gottman guy,
And I guess the other thing you said too is just the boundaries, right? So like in the case of the non-addict, it's like, hey, if the person is not recovering or enrolling into recovery, well, why should you be with that person if the person is not doing that, right? It could also probably be on the flip side. And the person's in recovery, doing their best, but the other person says, well, you're the addict, I'm not going to go to therapy. So then addict may say, well, that's not cool, and also put a boundaries either way.
You have to be willing, if you want the relationship to work, family, couple, whatever it is, you have to be willing to put in the work. And couples therapy isn't I'm bringing my partner in so we can fix them. You know, it's just not, you know, and I think too many times that's men in general, men feel like they're being called into the principal's office, you know, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, we're not going to do that. I don't believe in that, you know, and yeah.
So you said the idea of like going in there and saying the idea of responsibility, like who's responsible for this, you know?
No, I want to try. No,
yeah.
Because that goes back to the whole blaming thing. I want people to be responsible for themselves. I want them to take accountability for their behavior and their act. Does that make sense? Did I cut you off too soon? Is that what you were headed?
No, it's because it's a big thing in addiction. Like who, you know, like you can go back and say, well, I grew up in a home that, you know, had plenty of alcoholics and plenty of like behaviors like taught me to kind of deal with my problems this way, and good times and bad. So I was taught this, and here I am, say I'm 13, 14 years old, and I'm addicted to, I don't know, marijuana or Oxycontin or something, and you're in a family therapy with someone, and the kid saying to their family, like, you're responsible for this. Like, you're the one that like kind of taught me to be this way.
Yeah, I wouldn't tolerate that. Because it goes away from personal accountability. Although I would have a nice little chat with the parents about, hey, congratulations, you've allowed a 14-year-old to use drugs to the point where they become addicted to them. You know, we got to talk about that level, what that looks like as a parent. And I mean, and you don't get to blame his friends, you know, and his girlfriend. You know, there's a certain amount of parenting that has to be involved. And the challenge there is like, you know, the parents don't want to be, I don't want them to be mad. I don't want them to hate me. I have a theory that I'm 60, people in my generation are, you know, maybe 10 or 15 years younger than me, kind of got raised in one of two methods. Can I swear? Okay. The first one is do what the fuck I tell you or I'll beat the living shit out of you. And then the second one is, I don't care, just fucking stay away from me and leave me alone and stay out of my hair. You know? And so what we've done as a generation is parented against and gotten so, you know, to the point where we get so attached and enmeshed, right, with our children that, well, I don't want them to be mad at me. Am I, you know, really? It's like, part of being a parent is having your kid be pissed at you because you're the one holding the ground. You're holding the boundary. Hold the boundary. You know, that's the hardest part of what I do is teach parenting. And by the way, just to like help you understand my system, I would never sit in a room with parents of the 14-year-old that's currently using. To me, that's a total waste of time. I would tell the parents to come in with themselves. What are we going to gain out? Where are we going to rationalize with a 14-year-old and be like, let me explain to you why this is a bad idea. The kid's going to be like, kiss my ass. I'll do what I want. You know, I'm going to teach the parents how to hold him accountable and say, okay, you know, if you're going to choose this is what's going to happen. We're going to take away the internet. We're going to take away the phone. We're going to layer it down. And if you can't get it together, then we're going to start talking about higher levels of care. Because let's be clear, nobody gets therapy. You can't get sober in therapy. There's no such thing. You know, that's not how it works. You can, when you get sober, therapy probably should be mandatory because we all had stuff, you know, but you can't throw somebody in a therapist's office and expect that therapist to magically make them quit drinking or using.
I mean, so a lot of times I'm directing them to other services that will help, kind of support them more on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. like a 12-step, or like assessing them for like a higher level of care, like inpatient or IOP, something that is more involved in their life. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you could build up motivation to quit, but you can't, like, yeah.
Yeah, like in both my books, I've created a plan. So like when the parents come in and they're like, our 14-year-old, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, so here's the plan. No drugs, no alcohol. You're going to drug test them and you're going to breathalyze them. And it's not going to be a surprise. You're going to just take it, and you're not going to do it at home. You're going to take them to a facility. And then second one is they're going to go to work, or they're going to go to school, or a combination of the two. And if they're going to go to school, they got to go to class, they got to turn on the homework, and they got to get good grades. That's their job, you know? And if they're, let's just say they're high school, right? That's what you got to do. But it's not up for negotiation. And you're not going to micromanage them and check on them every 15 minutes. Friday at 5, we're going to open up the portal, and the portal don't lie, you know? And if the portal says, oh, you missed these classes and you didn't turn in your homework and you're straight D thing, you now have a personal assistant for the weekend, you know, and until they get their homework done. I mean, you just have to. And then the last piece is only 3 boundaries. The last piece is family behavior. The number of teenagers that use language with their parents that, you know, my dad was nonviolent. At 14 years old, I was bigger than him. If I ever would have used that language, especially with my mother, I would have been on the floor wondering what hit me. You know, I mean, it just was like, it just blows my mind, the crop that parents take from these kids today. And I'm not saying they should hit them. I don't believe in it. What I'm saying is you've got to hold them accountable. And if they can't, and if they need help staying sober, we'll get them help staying sober. If they need help at school, we'll get them help at school. If they need help with their behavior, we'll get them help. We're not going to punish somebody into good. It doesn't work, you know. We're going to support them.
Yeah, and it's so, what you're talking about is so important, just the idea of sort of teaching kids boundaries and accountability. You said something that really stood out for me, which is that parents today try to just make sure that they're not offending their kids, and they're not hurting their kids, and there's like over-indexing on that. And so beyond doing this, I am an engineering leader. I run engineering teams, software engineering teams. So I manage teams of people of many, many different ages. And what I've noticed is that the younger generations are way less resilient to literally everything: chaos, problems, conflict. And it's because parents, tailor towards kids too much. I was telling my parents the other day that I don't believe in spanking kids. I don't believe in that. But it's like you look at the older generations, and I think like a spanked kid from like my generation maybe has some dysfunctions, but it's more resilient than a very tailored towards younger kid of the new generations. And it's almost a disservice to the kid, right? Because while you're tailored to the kid, now you're less resilient in life.
Totally. I don't necessarily think I'm with you. I don't think spanking's the solution. And I only don't think spanking is what taught us. You know what it was? It was the threat of the spanking. For me at least. Yeah, I never really, I think I got spanked once or twice as a kid, but it was the threat of, and then again, it's not about bullying or physical intimidation, but it's about accountability, and for me, the lights clicked on when my freshman year in high school. I was a disaster and got caught cutting and all sorts of trouble. And my dad sat me down and he was like, I want you to understand something. If you don't do well in high school, you're not going to go to college. You're going to end up living at home the rest of your life. Well, now today, those kids are like, sweet. Yeah. But, for me, I was like, I got to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, I remember that bumper sticker that came. I don't even know what it was, like in the late 70s, 80s. It's like, children should be seen and heard. And it's like they had to put a bumper sticker like back then, like, because before that, it wasn't that way. Like they had it was like,
it seems like we've swung the pendulum, right? It was on the wrong side of wrong side. Now we have to come to some sort of balance. Question about going back to chronic hope. So first of all, thank you for narrating that whole journey of yours. Has been pretty amazing. I love how You started with MFT, and then you got to work with young people in ER, and they got to work with families, and you were even doing some work in Spain, so you got the multicultural aspect, et cetera, et cetera. So how does that all come now together in your own thing, Chronic Hope? And what do the programs look like there from everything you've carried over there?
So on the Chronic Hope Institute, what we do on the coaching side is work with the families and really take it from a perspective of, I get that first phone call, right? It's the crisis phone call. Oh my God, what do I do? Things are out of control. I'm like, okay. Well, then, here, let's figure out how to get things back under control. And they're, inherently what they're looking for is like, what's the magic pill, or what's the magic therapist or magic solution? I'm like, there is no magic pill. What we're going to do is change the way you're parent. Right? I mean, you made the comment that you manage team and software, and so here's the thing. And this is one of the analogies I like drawing with the families is when a company is going broke or a team is struggling, you don't fire the receptionist. That's not the solution, right? The solution is to go back to the management team and say, hey, your people are having a problem. Do we need to train them better? Is there more accountability, or is there too much academy? What's going on? Because it always starts at the top and comes down, right? In my estimation, that's good leadership is what makes the difference, right? And being able to say, okay, we notice that your team turns over every 6 months. I wonder why that is. And you tend to be more of a, not you, but more of a militant leader, and it's like, that's not working. Or like you just said, you have multi-dimensional people, and you're going to have to learn how to work with, people that are all kind of coming from all different perspectives, and so it's the same thing as parenting, right? Your 16-year-old is flunking out of high school because they're hung all day, or more commonly, your 21-year-old in college is flunking out. And, you've tried take them to the individual therapy, take them to the psychiatrist, take them to the general practitioner, take them God knows where, and that hasn't worked. So now, here's my perspective. Let's change the way you're interacting with them. Stop trying to reason with them. Stop trying to rationalize with them. Just set some rules. No drugs, no alcohol, and we're going to be drug testing you every week. And if you're drinking a lot, we're going to breathalyze you. Oh, I won't do it. Oh, okay. If you won't do it, then we're going to go to a higher level of care. You're going to get an intervention. You're going to go to treatment. It's just that simple. And it's not a threat. We're not walking around with a big stick in our hand. It's just, this is what's going to happen. The analogy I love is when you're driving down the road, right? On there's a sign that says, 55 miles an hour, and there's a cop shooting radar. You're going 75, and he just kind of waves at you. That's not an effective boundary. It's the same thing with parenting. You have to be willing to pull the trigger. So, to answer your question, that's what I have taught people, and that's what I've learned to teach people. And what I was realizing, I can make this information a lot more readily available across the country through coaching and through training. That's really the vision of the Chronic Hope Institute.
Right. Spreading the love that way, spreading the knowledge. You 2 books that you've written. Can you tell us what the titles are so people know where they can?
The first one is called Chronic Hope, Parenting the Addicted Child. When I would come home every night from work, and my wife would say, "How was work?" I'm like, "Well, if I had more clients," but me saying the exact same thing to each family, I was like, "I'm going to make a cardboard cutout and put it in my office and say, push this button for my 16-year-old won't stop smoking pot. Now, push this button for my husband drinks a lot." And they were like, "Oh, okay." And so she was like, "What I think you ought to do is you ought to write a book, because you obviously have a system and blah, 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 blah. I think that's what you need to do. So that's how the first book evolved. And it's really 100 pages. Yeah. Yeah. And the second book, Chronico Families and Addiction, was an evolution of the first book when people were like, okay, but I don't have a 16-year-old boy. I have a husband. I have a wife. I have an adult, da-da-da-da. And so I geared this one more towards the world and more engaging into the family system and going after the family system. And so that's really where that comes from. And sort of breaking into 3 segments, triaging the crisis, addressing the family issues, and then how to reconcile everybody back. Yeah.
So it sounds like your organization is one where, if a family is in crisis, they can pick up the phone. They can say, hey, we're having problems. Can you guys help? It's like, is that correct? Am I reading that correct?
Yes. So if someone's listening and they're like, I have this situation, or I think I may have this situation and I don't know what to do. A family member, a loved one is struggling and I don't want them to die. We have the resources we have available are initially just the books, right? Which are on Amazon, Audible, Kindle. And then the next level is, we have a training and like an online course for families as well. And that comes with 1 session with me, and then 4 sessions with all the educational piece is $1,500, and 8 sessions is $2,500. And we can break those sessions up into half hours. And it really depends on the situation. I mean, a lot of families think, oh, we'll just meet with them once. And I'm like, well, meeting with me once is really just going to lay out. You're going to give me an idea of what's going on. You're going to need follow-up on what to do next and how to do it. And we go all the way through, like, this person needs treatment. Let me help you find a treatment place. Let me help you find an interventionist. Let me work with you and teach you how, give a 25-year-old girl, it's a different place than a 17-year-old boy, or a 45-year-old man, And so it's about helping them tailor make. And then everybody has a different budget. Not everybody can throw $100,000 in. And so it's about helping them. And so it's really about walking them through that entire process and acting as a guide to the family, And then the thing that I started last year was this online education piece for therapists. Was the one thing I noticed is that therapists just don't know anything about families that are struggling with addiction.
Yeah, that's correct. I've experienced that myself, so I know.
Well, and the biggest challenge I get is when I talk to therapists that are not involved in the addiction arena, it's like, oh, I don't work with them. And I'm like, okay, nothing personal, but that's incredibly naive. Yes, you do. They're in your office. You just don't know. You think it's something. And so there's an education curve that has to happen with those people, with those therapists, and teach them that, here, let me show you that what you're dealing with is actually someone in the system with addiction that everybody else is and let me show you how to handle it.
Yeah, and I think, coming from a world where I was a very functional addict, even though I would drink a lot and do certain drugs, I was very functional. Never lost a job. I had things going good together. What I saw in myself and I see now in close friends of mine is I think there's a little bit of a denial in our society of what classifies as an addict. Because I have friends that say, well, I'm not an addict, but wait, you drink a bottle and a half of wine. It seems like you can't not do that. So are you not an addict? So the therapist probably doesn't have, the education knowledge, but also people are probably not holding themselves accountable enough to admit that, hey, and I think it's due to the stigma, right, that we have with addiction and alcoholism in general. Like, it's harder for people that are functional to admit because, like, oh no, I'm not the heroin addict like laying in the park. I'm not one of those. I only drink a bottle of wine a day. But it's the same thing, right? And I think the stigma prevents us from seeing that.
Even the term functional. Nothing against you. I love you. You're great. In my books and in my lectures, I'm like, there's no such thing. You can't be a functional alcoholic. You're an alcoholic, you're an alcoholic. Now, Some of them are pushing shopping carts, sleeping in the park. You know, some of them have jobs, but their families are falling apart.
Yeah, that's so true. So true.
Their lives are falling. But that goes to what you were saying, right? Is that we've kind of created this sociological cover story. Well, he's got a job and he makes money, so everything's okay. No.
It's like we've built a class hierarchy in the world of addiction, right? Like there's the low part of the totem pole, which is like people in the park, right? And there's CEO, multimillionaire CEO who, has an opiate addiction.
Yeah, right. And the DSM doesn't help, because the DSM has all these different levels of qualification. And one of the first things you'll see when you do my training, because you both need to do my training, is that there's just, you either is or you isn't an alcoholic or an addict. There's no, it's like being pregnant. You either are or you aren't, and it's not something you pick up at the public restroom or for hanging out with the wrong crowd. It's when I drink, I don't have a filter, I don't have an off switch, and I become incredibly unpredictable. I have one sister who's a couple of years younger than me. She doesn't have that problem. So I just got lucky. I got that gene, whatever you want to call it, and I don't believe it's something that you can. I think it definitely helps to have a family system that has it in it historically, and I get that. I totally get that, but I think that I didn't learn it by watching my mother. I learned it that when I started drinking, I was like, oh my God, this is great. Where was this? And that's the difference.
Yeah, I think we've been talking a lot on this podcast about like therapy, recovery, change takes work.
Yeah.
It takes work and the person struggling with addiction, it takes work to get recovered, but it's also, if you really want to help that person, you have to like really explore yourself and why, some of the barriers you have, like you say, like setting up boundaries with them. Say, I want to set up a boundary with my husband. I want to set up a boundary with, my 30-year-old daughter or, and you get to a point in therapy where it's like, that by doing this, like you're not helping at all other than yourself. Like you feel better and you refuse, and they continue to like not be able to push through that. Like I do this because I want to feel better, or I do this because I'm afraid, of what could happen to this person if I don't continue to enable.
Yeah. Oh, and I get that all the time. And one of the responses I have is, I want you to understand, these things are going to happen no matter what. Whether, I'd rather he lives in the basement so I can control what's going on. And I'm like, well, then he's going to die in your basement. Does that make you feel better? How about we give him an option of getting sober? And you're totally right. So let's be totally honest. Addicts are easy to work. Addicts and alcoholics are super easy to work with. Stop doing drugs, stop drinking, go to your 12-step meetings or whatever system you want to use to quit drinking. That's it, man. It's really that simple. How many times do you want to have the same call? Oh, you got your third DUI? Oh, you got arrested again? Okay. The families, the codependent, they think they're making the trains run on time. They think they're the only thing separating that person from completely falling apart. And so their sickness is so much deeper rooted because they think they're actually controlling another person. And let me tell you something, that's handed down generation to generation. And so getting into that family system and uncorking that, getting that genie out of the bottle. But and here's the real challenging part is the codependent person will start to realize eventually, I'm going to put them out of a job. So-and-so is going to get sober and get their act together. And they're not going to have anything left to do other than take care of themselves.
Right. I see it in my personal situation when things got really difficult between my ex-wife and I. She asked me to leave the house, not in those nice words. It was a little bit less nice than those words, but yeah, so I had to leave the house. And of course I was upset about it. So she put that boundary, and while I was really upset, it's the best thing that she could have done, because it was now me hitting a low of sorts that made me think like, oh crap, I have to act on this. It's no longer like whenever I get to it. It's like, it's got to happen. So the boundaries will be more helpful to the addict than the codependents and trying to save the addict.
And I'll tell you, every family I work with will tell me a couple of, people only get sober when they want to get sober. That's a total lie. It's complete and total lie, and you just said it. Because the same thing happened to me. You know when I got sober? When the consequences got so high, I had to face it. You know how your consequences get high? The people around you start holding boundaries. Okay? And then the other one I get is, well, he doesn't want to get sober. He doesn't want to go to treatment. And I'm like, oh, I don't really care what he wants. What? It's irrelevant what he wants, Do you want to keep riding the roller coaster? My favorite analogy. I said, so in a family system like that, where individuals still actively using, disrupting the family, I said, let me ask you, every morning you wake up and you open the front door to your house and the trolley car from the roller coaster shows up and you get in and just go on and away you go. How do you like that? Is that fun for you? Are you enjoying this? And they're like, no, I hate it. I said, okay, so what if you didn't get in the car? I just let it go. What if that happened? Well, I don't know what'll happen. Right. But there's a better chance that person's going to face sobriety than if you get in the cart with them. Because now you're co-signing. Oh, this is great. Let's go. Let's go have fun. I'll pay your bills. I'll take care of everything. Everything will be all right. That's what happened to me. What happened to you. And that's the premise of everything I do, is helping people understand.
One thing that could be helpful also to the listener. So as we're having this session, I keep thinking, man, if I could go back in time, one thing that would have helped me is an organization like yours, right? Or the kind of therapy that you've been talking about now is not that common to find it. So if somebody's out there struggling with their family because they're addicts, or they have a significant other that's an addict, or a child that's an addict, what is the best methodology to find local help? Because it's hard. It's really, really hard. This kind of help.
Well, that's why I started what I did. Because I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is you can go to chronichope.us and we can do coaching anywhere in the country. I work with people all over the country, and so, at the very least, take a look at our, buy the book, watch this podcast, I'm going to have a YouTube channel. If you guys will let me, I'll slap this on the YouTube channel. Man, and that's the thing, man, is like, because you're right. There isn't. So that's why I do the training for therapists to help them understand when this person walks in and says, oh, my husband won't stop drinking. And they're like, oh, I don't have any training involved. And they can be like, oh, I just did an online training with this guy, Kevin Peterson. And he says we need to set boundaries in 3 categories. And let's be clear. There's boundaries, there's accountability. So here's the boundary. Here's what's going to happen. And then structure, which is the rewards and consequences, which is if you don't follow through, this is what's going to happen. That's where the family has to be willing to commit, So that's the answer to your question is just go to my website, send me an email, join my newsletter. Happy to help, There
are tools, and then there's, like I always tell people when it comes to like assertiveness, like I can teach you how to say the words, but it's just a matter of getting them out of your mouth, It's like a matter, I can teach you how to set a boundary. I can teach you how to set something, but you have to be willing to say it, So it's almost like these families have to understand also that they're going into therapy too, because a lot of times those barriers to kind of following through with some of these plans, it's really deep rooted. Like some of that's,
For all sorts of different reasons, and the reality is that the addiction is affecting the entire family system, and so the entire family has to get help, not just the individual, But it starts with addressing the individual and saying, "Hey, we love you, but we're not doing this." And if this continues, this is what's going to happen. However, if you want help, we will help. And if you don't want help, that's your prerogative. But then this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, one thing that I didn't understand until very recently, actually, is when you take a stance like that, it's like, hey, we need this to happen, otherwise this is going to happen. I always saw it like as a threat. So I was the kind of person that I don't want to threaten people, but there's a way to do it where you're not threatening people, but you're really setting a boundary, right?
Yeah, I get like, well, what you're seeing is tough love ultimatum. No, I'm not giving any ultimatums. I'm saying you're an adult. I respect your choices. If you want to keep doing drugs and alcohol, that's your choice. You're just not going to stay here. You're not going to live here.
Exactly. It's like you put it about yourself. You're saying like, you may want to keep doing drugs. That's awesome. I don't want to be close to it. So the boundary is on me. Like, I don't want to be close to it.
Yeah, the boundary is about you. It's not about them. And by just holding that accountable and just saying, if you don't want to choose this lifestyle, that's fine. I mean, if you're under 18, we have authority where we're going to make you choose the lifestyle. And then, and if you're in college, we have probably some financial authority over you, so we can sort of, there's definitely more leverage we can. But if someone's an adult, and I get this all the time where somebody's an adult, and I'm like, yeah, that's okay. Just tell them, hey, look, that's fine. If you want to keep living like this, you keep living like this, but you're going to do it without us. And I mean, emotional support, financial support, you are on your own, chief, and that's where people tend to be, they struggle, but what they realize is, it's really the only thing. I get this all the time. He's 30 and I have no leverage. I have no control. I'm like, you have all sorts of them. Because right now you're just co-signing his bullshit. So how about we stop doing that and watch what happens?
Just, is there a place where you say like, when it is financial and emotional and, all these other factors that you're providing support, saying like, well, approaching it like with a family, approaching it differently, like not like abandoning them, but like saying like, I will continue to be there for you on this level, but I can't be here for you. Like I can't pay for things. I can't rescue. I can't drive you to detox anymore. I can't drive, but I will answer your phone.
Yeah. I mean, by all means, talk to them, that's fine. But it's important that every conversation is, hey, are you ready to get help? I mean, but the moment you accept that behavior and the person that's drinking or using is like, oh yeah, my parents, they're okay with it, that doesn't work. So it's, that soft, I get what you're saying. So my position is, I love you, you're my son, but until you're willing to get help, I'm putting some huge boundaries. I'm putting some giant, we're gonna do this across the board because you're affecting me, you're affecting my lifestyle.
Great point. Yeah, great point. Like every conversation is like, this is where we want you. This is where, this we need to be. And if you're calling to try to convince me differently, like we're not doing that.
Yeah, then there's no negotiating. There's no compromising. There's no, well, but what about, nope. Yeah.
Yeah. Drink for 3 days, can you send me rent?
No. When I used to do the family program, I always asked I tell people, oh, how many people here, paid someone's car payment, paid someone's rent, or bought them groceries? They all raise their hand, like, you bought drugs, right? And they're like, what? And the kid was like, I'm like, what do you think they spent the money? So
yeah, just being, it's hard. It's hard to watch people struggle. It's hard to sit back and watch people struggle.
But the important part of the family to understand is you're offering them a solution. You have a plan. So you're not just cutting them off and saying, la, 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 I don't see you. It's, here's the solution. When you're ready, let me know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But until then, I can't buy into this,
And it's really fascinating. I feel like in these family situations, you're struggling with two things, right? One is the addiction problem. And the other one is that we as human beings just don't know how to deal with interpersonal relationships. We just have really bad systems to do it, which ironically may be at the root of the addiction of the other person, or at least contributing to the addiction of the other person.
Yeah, you'll add me to, it's, I think addiction is more genetic. And I mean, I think the sort of system around them can definitely accelerate things, no questions asked. But, everybody has trauma, right? And so this idea that trauma creates addiction, well, then everybody should be an out, because everybody has trauma. So I don't buy that. There are people that are genetically predisposed that when they start using drugs and alcohol, their body reacts different. Now, does, a crazy family system and a system where people are constantly getting accelerate the process? Absolutely,
Yeah, and I think on the flip side, if it was a super healthy family system, even if the kid gets in trouble, they can get out of trouble a lot quicker, a lot easier, even on their own.
Yeah, because they've been taught, skills, and the family is noticing things like, oh, shit, your grades are going down. And, we're getting calls from the school. What's going on? And they don't wait till the house is already burned down to the ground and they're like, what happened? So, I'm with you entirely. Yeah.
When you say it's genetic, I know that when I was working in rehabs, we showed that film Pleasure Unwoven, which really explains some of the neurological and chemical responses to consuming drugs. And we always showed it to families. We always showed it to families. And sometimes I always, I kind of thought well, this kind of explains why they can't. They seemingly are not making decisions. Decisions are making now. So at one point I stopped and said, wait, are we showing this to families to give them the idea that it's more of an excuse for the addict? Because it felt like an excuse, well, I can't control myself. I can't, that's why I make the decisions that I make.
Yeah, I totally, and the families are like, well, so he gets a free pass. I'm like, hell no, he doesn't get a pass, he gets full accountability, and I mean, it's like, someone's finding out they have lung cancer and they're like, well, I have lung cancer, so I can just keep smoking. I mean, it's not my fault. It's like, no, you're an idiot. It's not what we're going to get. I love Pleasure Unwoven. Kevin McCauley's a pal of mine. I think he's the greatest. And every family I work with, I'm like, okay, here's your homework. Get yourself a copy of, Pleasure Unwoven. And it really does open their eyes. They're like, oh, because at some point they always think, well, he's choosing, and he's self-medicating his problems. And I'm like, oh, if only it was that simple, and that's, nobody chooses to be an addict, and it's, trust me, it's a miserable existence, and it's, lonely and scary and horrible. And there's just this huge emptiness inside you. And, it's horrid. But it's also something that once it kicks in, it's insidious and cunning, baffling, and powerful and crafty, right? you don't even realize it. You're like, hey, how did I get here again? And so for the family members to understand, well, it's a disease. This is a real thing. And it gets, here's my other thing that's really important to tell families. The disease starts with the first drink, not the 12th. It's not a question of moderation. It's the moment the first drink is taken, the disease is off. And I would even challenge these short drink. The mental
Oh, totally. So unfortunately, we're up to the time here. I could keep going for an hour easily, though. I'm really into it.
Me too, man.
Yeah, we have to do it again. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us some of your time. Thank you for all the references and resources that you mentioned, for the listener. Super helpful.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for your time, guys.
Check out some of those trainings.
Yeah.
Well, I'll send it to you.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Thanks so much, Kevin. This is super vital information. Hopefully, we're able to help some families, help some, through doing this and emphasize the importance of families, getting their own treatment, doing their own work, and working, because it is work.
Yeah, and I do believe that this problem of addiction in families is a lot more pervasive than we as a society want to admit, because it's not only drug addiction, there's porn addiction, there's work addiction, there's many kinds of. So I would say that a good number of families are struggling with this issue today. So thank you for your...
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. And this was great, man. I could do this all day. And when I'm with you, addiction is... so massively rampant through our society on all different levels, and it requires a systemic solution, not just part of that is an individual solution, but then the system has to come with,
Great.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.